This is the After Party, live with Kim McAllister. Pick a couch, grab a drink, and settle into the conversation.
One small correction. This version of the After Party, a special edition, is not live. It is recorded, and it is about what some are saying is the largest IT outage in history. It turns out that, as it happens, I have my own personal tech support guy that lives in-house. So I was talking to him earlier, and I thought, why not bring him on the show and discuss a little bit about what happened and, I don't know, how we can avoid this type of thing in the future, because this outage that brought the blue screen of death, and I have a picture in case you've never seen it, maybe you're a Mac user or something else, the blue screen of death. I remember working at KGO Radio in San Francisco. I'd get the blue screen of death in the middle of a newscast and the whole thing would just tank. So a lot of people have seen this before, and this was a widespread blue screen of death from 911 operators to airlines to hospitals to retail establishments. And while it's fixed now, apparently, it's still taking a long time for people to kind of, I don't know, reboot and get everything back up and running the way it was before. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about Crowdstrike and what happened. And in order to do that, I'll bring on my husband, David, who is a super whiz-bang tech guy. Hi.
Yeah, I wouldn't go so far as to call me super tech guy.
Okay, explain to the people what you do, because I get it wrong every time I try to do it.
Okay, I do what's called developer operations. Well, and now they've thrown security in it, so the abbreviation is DevSecOps. And I support software developers in creating infrastructure, so virtual computers, virtual machines, installing the software for them and maintaining that software, setting up testing infrastructure.
You sound a little loud, so back off the mic just a little bit. But you're an expert, I would say, in computer testing, manual, automated, all these type of things, right? Things that are before
from a testing environment.
So the way the software works, for people that don't know, usually is they put out a software and then they upgrade it over time, right? So you put out an updated release of software that makes it do different things and act better. And every time a new update is released, there's someone who's gone over the testing of that software. Is that about how it works?
In theory, sure.
Okay. So this, from what I understand, came down to one line of code. And my question is, where are the testers when it comes to this massive Crowdstrike failure?
Well, so I don't necessarily believe it's one line of code. Okay. But one line of code changes can actually get missed fairly easily because everybody just shrugs their shoulders and says, we're only changing one line of code. But, especially in something, so this was in a configuration file. And so if they screw up the configuration file, usually those are read from top to bottom. They're just text or something similar to that. So they're read from top to bottom. If you screw up something at the top, you screw up the entire file. And the problem was it didn't affect Mac or Linux. Mac under the hood is pretty much like Linux. It only affected Windows machines. And it affected them so badly that it wasn't just the blue screen of death was the problem. If you get that, you reboot. They continually got the blue screen of death. Even after these people tried to reboot, it would just constantly cycle over and over the blue screen of death. And so you have to go into, anybody that's ever used a Windows computer and ran into problems, you have to go into safe mode. So they would have to load up into safe mode, which would not load up this Crowdstrike antivirus security software, because that loads up right when you boot up the computer. So they would have to load this up, and then they have to go in and find that broken configuration file and remove it. Then they could boot up their system. And after Crowdstrike, or as my coworkers have started to call it, Clownstrike, after Clownstrike fixed their problem,
right,
then they could upgrade with the proper configuration file and everything was fine. It really only apparently seemed to affect large Asian markets and European markets. Most people in North America and South America, because of time zones, weren't affected. And obviously, if you didn't upgrade your CrowdStrike, you didn't get the botched configuration file. So it didn't universally affect people across the board.
Well, we saw the ground stop for airlines here in America because of communications issues with several airlines, really creating quite a problem. So then, because of the time zone, was it only like hospitals, 911 dispatch, airlines, where it's a 24-hour operation because of that?
Yeah, and they'll still do their updates in the middle of the night. So that's why even places in North America like that would have gotten it. And it just causes a cascading failure, because then your systems go down, and so your reservation computers go down, and you can't coordinate that. You can't coordinate checking people in. I'm sure it didn't affect the actual airplanes, because those aren't going to be running Windows software, but anything related to getting human beings in the plane and then landing the human beings, that probably was a problem.
So how embarrassing of a failure is this for CrowdStrike?
Oh, it's going to be huge. I mean, their stock was down, whatever it was, 7%, 8%, 9%. And there are other security. I mean, Palo Alto Networks is another security firm that does a similar thing. So you're going to have all of these companies swooping in to fill the bill. I stumbled upon a coworker showed me a interesting Reddit thread about it's related to finance, where somebody 4 hours before this happened said, "Oh, CrowdStrike isn't worth $83 billion." 4 hours later, the guy was right.
So does it show at all that maybe we're too dependent on the same software, that this could cause this much of a problem? Or what do you think?
It's a catch-22, because if it works really well and everybody's using it and trusts it, then if there's improvements to be had, or if there's a threat actor. So, everybody's heard of these terms by now, worms, Trojans, viruses. If there's one of these threat actors and one vendor finds it quickly, then one vendor can then distribute a fix or a preventative really quickly. So it allows you to execute really quickly. But obviously the downside is that if that one vendor does something pickle-headed, like mess up a config file and then not adequately test it, then if things come crashing down.
Well, I would say it's probably pretty embarrassing, because isn't the whole point of CrowdStrike to prevent viruses and malware and hacks and all these type of things from taking down a network?
Yeah. That's
so it kind of did the very thing that it was supposed to not do.
One thing they will probably implement going forward is phased releases, unless it's something super emergent. This was just my understanding is this wasn't an emergency. This was just a standard update. So one thing you can do to prevent that would be to do phased rollouts. So you only roll out your improvements to smaller groups to see if you did something boneheaded, which they did. And then they would have caught this in a smaller time frame.
Right.
Another policy is to if it's not an emergency, don't necessarily automatically update stuff anymore. So you're going to have airlines and other large, important infrastructure that's using these systems. The fault isn't just with CrowdStrike and Microsoft. The fault is with whatever airlines didn't vet the fix before they implemented it. They trusted that CrowdStrike and Microsoft had vetted this, and they can't do that. But
isn't it just like your phone, where like when my phone gets an Apple upgrade, it's automatic. I have no control over it. It's not the same thing.
The operating system. This is an application running on so they could have very easily taken one Windows. I mean, so American Airlines or United Airlines or whoever else could have taken one Windows machine and upgraded CrowdStrike and let it run for 5 minutes, and they would have gotten the screen of death and said, "Yeah, we're not going to upgrade our systems," and they could have shut off the upgrades.
So who's at the helm? Like, why aren't these people thinking of what could go wrong and implementing these safeguards before the largest IT outage in history strikes?
There is nobody in charge. This presupposes that there's any one central authority for all of this stuff, and there isn't. It's the joy of CrowdStrike is crowdsource, is crowd fill in the blank. The upside is that you have lots of eyes. The downside is that dumb things like this can happen. So it's a balancing act, but it shows that and when any one software or application, or in this case, I mean, everybody's pointing at CrowdStrike, but look at the ubiquity of Microsoft and how it has wormed its way into so many crucial infrastructure. I mean, why didn't Microsoft test this before they allowed it to be released on their platform? Right. So it's multiple failures. It's at least 3 sets of failures, right? It's CrowdStrike for obviously introducing the bug. It's Microsoft's problem because they didn't vet it before they said, okay, go ahead and install it. Mm-hmm. And then it's these major platforms like the airlines who just said, okay, we'll trust CrowdStrike in a one-line change. So, all of them need to vet what's happening. It's part of having what's called a secure bill of materials, where you trust not only the software that you wrote yourself, but the 10 pieces of software you incorporate into your software, right? No, there isn't any such thing anymore as one piece of software there's no such thing as a large piece of software that doesn't incorporate 20, 30, 100 other softwares, and they may be what's called closed source or proprietary, or they could be open source. And you just have to start slowing down a little bit and start to really look at and test and understand what are the 100 things that are in my software. Do I trust all 100 of them?
So you came up with a few things that could have prevented this off the bat. Do you think that today and through this weekend, there are big meetings happening all over Silicon Valley and the tech world where people are like, uh-oh, how do we prevent this? What do we do? These type of things where they're looking at what happened and kind of running over it, doing a kind of Monday morning quarterbacking of it and looking at how to make it not happen again.
Well, they say that hindsight is 2020, right?
Yeah.
I mean, nothing about this is anything that anybody isn't aware of how to fix. It's a matter of, do you want to take the time to fix it? Clearly, there are holes in the release and implementation process between CrowdStrike and Microsoft. I'm running CrowdStrike on the Linux laptop that I have for my employer, and it has glitches every now and again that I have to deal with because I'm running Linux and I have to do things on my own. It's less what's called plug and play than, say, a Windows or a Mac environment. Mm-hmm. But there still needs to be this notion, if the bottom line is that if CrowdStrike's software is going to have bugs, and no matter what you do, they're going to get through. Mm-hmm. It becomes a matter of putting processes in place, either automated processes or human processes in place, to you get the update from CrowdStrike, and then before you allow all of your company's devices and users to run it, you test it on one machine. You take an extra 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. It's just everybody's really busy. So do I really have a spare 5 minutes? And this is what happens.
You do have a spare 5 minutes.
You have to find the spare 5 minutes.
Totally. And it, I think, really highlights the importance of having good people to test at various companies.
Yes. Well, like I said, I say it with my mocking, goofy voice, but on more than one occasion, I've had people, when I was a test engineer, say to me, it's just a one-line change. Yeah, it's just a one-line change to a core piece of the application. It's not like you're making a one-line change to the color of the sign up for free button. You're making a change to the entire, you're changing the spark plugs in the car. I only changed one spark plug. Yes, but if you change one spark plug and screw it up, the whole car doesn't run.
Right.
So it's not just a one-line change. It's where are you making the one-line change, and what is the understanding the impact of the one-line change. And like I said, clearly the ball was dropped multiple times and in many locations. So,
any other thoughts you want to share on this whole thing?
Yeah, I can say that everybody of the roughly 16,000 people who work at the company that I work at, I want to say about 500 of us use the Linux operating system, and all of us are having a good chuckle this morning.
All right, my tech guy, David, thank you for coming on the After Party Live. Much appreciated.
You're welcome, sweetheart.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, special edition of the After Party Live to talk about this major tech incident that kind of stopped a bunch of things from happening via airlines and hospitals and retail and everything else. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you on Monday right back here on YouTube. Please click the like button. Please click the subscribe button, and have a great weekend. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
The After Party Live would like to thank the following contributors and viewers like you.